My family built Redwood Ranch from raw wilderness almost 100 years ago. 200 acres of grassland and cedar trees, handed down like a sacred trust through 4 generations. Grandpa used to say the land was more than dirt. It was history, hard work, and sacrifice buried under every fence post. For years, nothing challenged that belief. Not weather, not dry spells, not the folks next door. But then the subdivision named Willow Creek showed up and turned everything upside down. Before we get into it, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's see how wide this story reaches. In the beginning, it was barely noticeable. A slick welcome package showed up in our mailbox, filled with HOA rules and happy talk about maintaining property values. We chuckled. Redwood Ranch wasn't part of their development. Their regulations didn't apply to us. But the amusement faded quickly. Pretty soon, nameless complaints started rolling into the county. Accusations about too much dust from our dirt driveway, animal waste close to their footpaths, even methane gas from our cows, putting families at risk. Every complaint brought forms, meetings, lost hours. Then the warnings started arriving. Laminated papers tacked to our mailbox. Every single one stamped with the HOA symbol. Warning: poorly maintained buildings visible from public roads. Reminder: noise rules are always in effect. They were ridiculous. Our barns were standing 50 years before their neighborhood existed. But they didn't stop coming. One day, I discovered a dead fish nailed to one of the notices. A threatening message scrawled in marker. Sell before things get uglier. Things definitely got uglier. Somebody stuffed peanut butter inside the barn's padlock. 2 times. Our gate's chain got snipped, allowing calves to roam dangerously near the county highway. Grandpa found a chunk of rock salt placed on his tractor's hood, the type designed to wreck an engine if you start it up. What started as annoyance began looking like deliberate destruction. And then their HOA enforcers appeared. White SUVs began parking by our gate after dark. Guys wearing identical polo shirts and carrying clipboards walked onto the pasture without permission, snapping pictures of our cattle like they were gathering proof. One actually had the guts to tell Grandpa to his face that his pasture was an eyesore and lowering property values. That's when we quit laughing. So we struck back with the one thing they never saw coming: evidence. I installed infrared cameras on the barn, the gate, and the house. Every intrusion, every vehicle, every clipboard got recorded in crystal clear quality and saved to cloud storage. Grandpa, careful as always, tracked each incident in his worn leather journal. Same book where he records calving dates and hay shipments. I copied every notice, captured screenshots of every anonymous message, organized everything neatly in 3-ring binders. Then I headed downtown. At Sheriff Brody's office, I dumped the pile of proof on his desk. Pictures of men trespassing, timestamps of cars at 2 a.m., even that infamous dead fish stapled to their flyer. He didn't crack a smile. He didn't brush it aside. He said, "This is harassment. You were right to report it." I also contacted the county zoning office. They confirmed what we already knew. The HOA had zero authority over Redwood Ranch. None whatsoever. No property rights, no environmental authority, nothing. Their board was all bark and no bite. The only mystery left was their next move: back off quietly or push harder. We didn't wait long for an answer. It was shortly past midnight when I heard the crunch of wheels on our gravel driveway. The cameras lit up showing that white SUV again. Except this time, 3 guys got out. No clipboards, no flashlights, just crowbars gripped like weapons and vests that read HOA cop. I was barely grabbing my phone when Grandpa came in from his bedroom. He already had the shotgun held low, jacket buttoned, boots tied. He said nothing, just gave me the kind of stare that made it clear this wasn't his first rodeo dealing with men sneaking onto property that didn't belong to them. "They're back," I whispered. "I know," he replied. His tone was cold, determined. We walked onto the porch side by side. The night was crisp, and the men were already coming up the walkway. One aimed his bar toward the barn. "By order of Willow Creek HOA, this property is condemned. We're shutting it down tonight." Grandpa raised the shotgun across his arm. "This isn't Willow Creek. This is private property. Turn around and go while you still can." The guy up front sneered. "Old man, you don't intimidate me." He raised the bar up, preparing to rush forward. Grandpa's voice sliced through the air. "Final warning." They ignored him. The ringleader charged forward, crowbar lifted like a bat. Grandpa squeezed the trigger. The boom rang out across the pasture, and the man twisted sideways, falling hard, his weapon bouncing across the gravel. The second guy yelled, hoisting his bar and sprinting at the porch. Grandpa's second blast dropped him halfway there, a devastating wound ripping through his thigh. He crashed to the ground screaming, blood pooling black in the dirt. Only the third man remained upright, paralyzed in the yard. He looked at Grandpa, then at his buddies bleeding out in the dirt. Carefully, he let go of his bar, hands shooting high above his head. On your knees, Grandpa commanded. The man complied, shaking as he dropped into the gravel. Inside, my phone was already against my ear. Sheriff's Department, the dispatcher answered. Units are en route. I barely had to explain anything. The gunshots were loud enough to hear over the line. For several tense minutes, the only noise was the moaning of the wounded and the steady sound of Grandpa chambering another round. He didn't point at anyone this time, just kept the shotgun ready, eyes fixed on the man kneeling in the yard. Red and blue lights danced against the trees minutes later. Deputies rushed up the driveway, guns drawn, yelling orders. Grandpa lowered his weapon and backed onto the porch. He didn't need to explain. The scene told the whole story. 2 intruders lay injured, 1 barely awake. The third was face down in the gravel, handcuffed before he could move. And Grandpa, he stood composed on the porch like a guardian who'd simply protected what was his. The HOA's little after-hours raid had ended in bloodshed, sirens, and total defeat. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe because the story is only going to get better. An ambulance crew bandaged the 2 injured men before hauling them toward town. The one with the thigh wound was still yelling, cursing Grandpa with every word. The other, the leader who'd caught the first shot, was ghostly white, fading in and out. The third trespasser, the one who'd given up, started talking once deputies parked him on a cruiser's bumper. He confessed everything. Who ordered them, what they were instructed to do, and the reason. We were told this property was condemned, he stammered, voice trembling. Said the HOA board approved it. Vice President Lydia Carver personally said she wanted it handled tonight. I'll never forget the expression on the deputy's face when he dropped her name. Lydia Carver had been hovering around my family's property like a vulture for months, spreading lies to her HOA board that Redwood Ranch was an embarrassment dragging down her pristine subdivision. But learning she'd gone as far as sending armed men, that sealed her fate. By sunrise, the news trucks were lined up down the street. Word traveled fast. HOA vigilantes shot during trespass at family ranch. Journalists flooded the courthouse when Grandpa and I made statements. He stood firm, his voice steady. They came to my house with weapons. I defended myself. That's the whole story. The sheriff supported him. His security footage captured the crowbars, the threats, and Grandpa's multiple warnings before pulling the trigger. Under state law, stand your ground, and the castle doctrine, he was completely within his rights to shoot when assaulted on his land. The district attorney declared there would be no charges against Grandpa. The 3 fake cops weren't as fortunate. The men faced charges for armed trespass, aggravated assault, conspiracy, and attempted burglary. Prosecutors tacked on impersonating officers after deputies discovered the fake HOA cop vests in their SUV. The 2 hospitalized men spent weeks under police watch, one with a destroyed femur, the other healing from chest wounds and a punctured lung. Both were chained to their hospital beds until they were healthy enough for court. Then there was Lydia Carver. When detectives examined phone records, it was all documented. Text messages and calls organizing the midnight raid. Money moved through HOA accounts. Even a draft email where she boasted this would finally solve the ranch problem. She was arrested on charges of solicitation of aggravated assault, criminal conspiracy, embezzlement of HOA funds, and attempted unlawful eviction. The courtroom was packed to capacity when her hearing started. Lydia attempted to pose for cameras, but her political ambitions were destroyed. Residents from her own subdivision spoke against her, outraged at her actions. One neighbor recalled she'd been bragging about establishing order in the community. Another confessed Lydia bullied them into signing empty forms she later weaponized to justify fake enforcement measures. By the time the civil lawsuit concluded, she was finished. A judge granted compensation to my family for harassment and trespass. The HOA itself was hit with massive fines and put under receivership. Lydia's political future was obliterated before it started. And Grandpa, he walked away vindicated, his reputation intact. He never showed off, never celebrated. He just cleaned his shotgun, returned it to its place, and said, "This land's been defended before. It'll be defended again if necessary." The HOA believed they could destroy a family through intimidation. Instead, they destroyed themselves against the barrel of an old man's determination.